Okay, the first order of business tonight is our public comment period, where we provide each speaker 2 minutes, up to a total of 10 minutes for 5 speakers. And so at this time, I'll ask 3 different times if anyone would like to speak before the board with any issue. Anyone wish to address the board? Anyone wish to address the board? Hearing none, we'll move on to the approval of county board minutes for November 14th, 2017.
Move approval. Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jacobs, seconded by Commissioner Olson, to approve the county board minutes of November 14th. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries with all voting aye. Consent comments and approval of the agenda. Mr. Fritz.
We had the one item 6.4 that we want to move to general business.
Okay.
It's for a short presentation.
Very good.
And I had some questions on item 6.8, so I don't know if we want to pull it just to ask those questions or when I can ask them,
I
whatever.
think you wanted to just ask the questions, and that's fine.
That's good. Okay.
Commissioner Ward.
I just want an announcement, please.
Commissioner Olson.
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Jacob.
Nothing for me.
County Attorney Sonneman.
Nothing for me.
All right. Approval of the agenda.
So, second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Ward, seconded by Commissioner Olson, to accept the agenda as amended. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed. Motion carries with all voting aye. Mr. Fritz, if you would like to read the consent recommendation, please.
Do you want the comments on 6.8?
Yeah, if we can just stop at 6.8, and
Okay.
I think Marie will ask your questions.
Okay. All right, I'll read the consent business into the record. 6.1, accept certificate of performance and authorize final payment, SAP 085-599-076. 6.2, approve agreement to provide professional services between Minnesota County Computer Cooperative and Strategic Technologies Incorporated. 6.3, approve retainer agreement to obtain legal services in connection with appeals of commercial industrial property tax valuations. 6.4 has been moved to the general business. 6.5, approve grant project agreement amendment with the Minnesota Department of Health. 6.6, approve monthly resolution. 6.7, approve 2018-2019 Minnesota Family Investment County Biennial Service Agreement. 6.8.
And that's the approval of the 2018 County Feedlot Program Delegation Agreement Work Plan. Commissioner Bessie.
Okay, and I don't know if this is a question for Emily or for Kay Qualley. I just wanted some comments, or I wanted to know, in light of the issue that we have with high nitrates in our wells, or a high number of wells having high nitrates, however you want to say it, I was just curious if there's any special attention being paid to the issue of nitrates.
Yep, so as part of all of my inspections, I do a thorough review of all the manure application records that the farm has. So folks that have 100 animal units or more are required to keep track of all the manure hauling that they do, as well as any commercial fertilizers that they're putting on that may have nitrates in them, and any nitrogen that comes over in the form of legume credit. And they also are required to keep maps of all the fields that they haul on and map out their sensitive features, and so I can determine if they're incorporating the manure or any nitrogen source properly, and I do that assessment on the farm. If I get into a situation where I'm at the farm and they don't have those records, they're required to get those into my office within 30 days.
Okay. Do we do any application of the land, do we do any inspection of the land application sites?
That is an option. We refer to those as level 3 inspections or land application inspections.
Okay.
And so on the plan, I think I put a range of 0 to 3 as time allows.
Okay. And in terms of record keeping, is there any way to know that Farmer A has manure going to 15 locations and Farmer B has manure going to 10 of those same 15 locations?
Yeah, so there's a paper trail that everyone is required to keep. So if Farmer A transferred manure to Farmer B, you would have to basically keep a paper trail Farmer B would also have to keep a paper trail so that both of them are combining all of the manure sources and the nutrient analysis of that manure to make sure they're not over applying. Regardless of where the manure is coming from, it needs to be added together.
Okay, so you can tell if some of the farmers are accepting manure from more than one dairy or feedlot. Okay. I think overall, I'm really just concerned about this issue, and I know we had a lot of comments at the county fair from the general public about this related to water. So are we doing anything to promote best practices? I know that's a little bit outside. Are we working together with?
You bet. Yep, actually this year, MPCA wants us to focus more on a watershed scale instead of just kind of randomly selecting farms. So I'm going to be working more closely this year with our water planner, Sheila Harms.
Okay.
Just to focus our attention together as a united front.
Okay.
Do more workshops, do more mailings, educating people, and promoting the nitrogen best management practices.
Okay. Okay, thank you. That takes care of my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Marie. Ken?
Okay, 6.9, approve write-off of uncollectible accounts. 6.10, confirm payment of disbursements. And that should conclude the consent business.
Motion to approve as presented, or
Second.
as read in.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Olson, seconded by Commissioner Kovesi, to approve the consent business as presented. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The next item is 7.01, which was,
I'm going to maybe,
sorry.
I think a point of order.
okay.
Did we miss number 4?
No, I'm doing that now under 7.1.
No, number 4, not
That's been pulled.
No,
receipt of the committee
Extension.
minutes for extension.
Number 4.
Oh, by golly. Good job.
That's why I hesitated.
Good job. For me, not a good job, but for you, a good job. Item 4.1 is the acknowledged receipt of the approved committee minutes for the Extension Committee for July 13th.
I'll move to acknowledge those.
Second.
We have a motion by Commissioner Jacobs, seconded by Commissioner Ward, to acknowledge the receipt of those approved minutes for the Extension Committee on July 13th. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, motion carries with all voting aye. We will now go to 7.01, which is formerly 6.4, which is the approval of the Prosecutorial Crime Victim Services 2017 to 2019 grant agreement. I believe there were going to be some comments here.
Yes, thank you, Chair Pomeroy. Tonight, we just wanted to make a brief presentation about our crime victims office in the Winona County Attorney's Office, and to go with our request that you approve the grant that has been received. And Claire Exley, who's our coordinator for crime victims in my office, is here to make that presentation. So I'll turn it over to Claire.
Thank you. Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Crime happens in every community. Victims of crime include those who have experienced violent crime, such as assault, robbery, domestic and sexual violence, but also those individuals who are victims of general crime. General crime includes, but is not limited to, burglary, theft, arson, criminal damage to property, and identity theft. A victim of any one of these crimes may struggle to make sense of why the crime occurred and what can be done. The Winona County Attorney's Office of Crime Victim Services helps victims of crimes that are prosecuted by our office navigate and understand the criminal justice system while a case proceeds through criminal court. Victim Services also provides information to crime victims about their rights granted to them under Minnesota Statute 611A. Services include accompanying victims to court, notifying them of court hearings, obtaining their input on plea proposals, providing them with assistance in preparing and presenting victim impact statements, and working with them to obtain restitution. In 2016, Victim Services had 2,705 documented contacts with the 424 identified victims of crimes prosecuted by the Winona County Attorney's Office. The actual contact number is likely higher, as not every contact with the victim is always recorded in our system, such as contact with attorneys or office support staff. For adult cases in 2016, Victim Services served 139 domestic violence victims, 13 sexual assault victims, 77 person crime victims, and 48 burglary victims. In addition, there were 147 victims who fell into the other category, which consisted of survivor of homicide victims, arson, theft, and other various property crimes. For juvenile cases, Victim Services served 15 domestic violence victims, 15 sexual assault victims, 10 person crime victims, 6 burglary victims, and 29 victims who fell into the other category. The majority of these cases were felony-level offenses, with 189 adult felony cases and 13 juvenile felony cases. The provision of crime victim services is a statutory requirement for every prosecution office in the state of Minnesota under Statute 611A. The Winona County Attorney's Office has met these statutory requirements for over 20 years with the assistance of grant funding from the state of Minnesota. Over the past several years, the grant funding has enabled us to staff the Crime Victim Services Coordinator position full-time, as well as pay for direct victim assistance services, victim notifications, community training, and community outreach. While our office collaborates with other agencies who serve crime victims, our office is solely responsible for meeting the statutory obligations for victim notifications and ensuring that the rights of victims in all criminal cases prosecuted by our office are fulfilled. The Winona County Attorney's Office was eligible to apply for $127,290 in grant funds over a 2-year period for crime victim services. Our grant application was accepted. The Winona County Attorney's Office Crime Victim Services is dedicated to assisting victims and survivors in the aftermath of crime. We ask that you reaffirm your commitment to crime victims by approving the grant agreement and the resolution, authorizing County Attorney Karin Sonneman to sign all necessary grant documents for this grant program. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I do see a grant agreement, but I do not see a resolution. So, anyway, Karen?
That should have been in the package. I guess I'll have to submit that. So again, as Claire indicated, this is funding that we've received for many years, and we're actually in a 5-year grant cycle, and this is the first time they've offered it in a 2-year cycle. So it was competitive last year. We got that grant, and thank you for approving it last year. And this year they're doing 2 years, so we're hoping that we'll continue to meet the standards that the state requires. So we would ask that you approve this grant, and again, it's for 2 years, not 1 year for $127,000, but for 2 years.
Commissioner Ward?
A couple questions. The budget that we were given, though, is that based on, it's basically personnel costs. So
That's
is
right.
that based on 2 years or 1 year? Let's see, because it totals up to 98. So is that
There's
just
also
for-
in-kind involved in there. So, for instance, my salary, because I supervise the position of crime victims coordinator, is included in some of those hours that we have to have a matching grant. And I think I just lost my screen here, but we have to meet a certain match requirement of in-kind contributions, so that budget reflects parts of my salary, also our staff that assists Ms. Exley, and then the overhead.
It's based on a cost allocation.
Yeah, it's
plan?
based on a
Okay.
cost allocation. So what you see in terms of the budget, it would be for both years, and the $127,000 is the actual cash funding that the state would give us.
Okay, so I guess I'm still a little confused. The grant runs through the end, is it calendar year or no, it expires September 30th, 2019.
Right. It's the state's
Calendar.
Mhm.
Okay, so how, in a budget process, do we have this person covered for 2 years' time or just?
Well, our budget only goes through 2018,
Right.
but because it's not in sync with the state or the federal, we always budget, we're budgeting half from the previous year and half for this year, if you kind of understand what I'm saying. So yes, it's covered, but.
Okay, but 98 plus 98 doesn't equal 140.
98 plus 98
Well, if
equals.
I took the budget, if I took a budget summary for 1 year, and if it's 98,140, and then I add the 24 and divide that by 2, the math doesn't come out. So I don't know what I'm agreeing to.
Oh, okay.
And but the
one is the state, and then the other one is the match.
and they're working the 24 off, right?
I'm sorry, what?
They're working the 24 off, right?
The 24 off. We put in the time, right. Yeah,
Time
right.
versus, okay.
Yeah.
So what was the reasoning that the state went from a 5-year cycle to a 2-year cycle? Is this, and then it's going to go to a 1-year cycle?
Well, and I kind of misspoke there. It's actually, they call it a non-competitive 5-year grant, but it really is somewhat competitive because you have to do the work. I mean, you can't just stand there and collect the money. Last year, we entered into the first year of that 5-year non-competitive status, but we still have to fill out the applications as we did, and we have to, there are performance measures that the state has, and so we've met those. They decided to go with 2 years, which is kind of nice because then for some agencies, and I think for us too, you have that consistency. Then you don't have to file another grant because it takes time to prepare these grants. So we're hopeful that if we continue doing the work that we're doing, and Claire, by the way, is just incredibly talented. We're very lucky to have her, Winona State grad. She has been out in the community. It's really expanded and enhanced our services to victims, crime victims, as well as the community. But so this 2 years would be part of that 5-year non-competitive cycle. And then I'm assuming if the money does come through on the federal level and the state level, because this is a combined federal state funding, part of it's from the Violence Against Women Act, and the other is the VOCA, and help me out, Claire, what's VOCA? Thank you, office, yeah, the state part. Violence Against Women's Act is the federal money. If that continues to be received, and I must also put in a plug for Senator Jeremy Miller. He was instrumental in helping make sure that we had that continued state funding on that portion of it for the whole state of Minnesota, actually. So I'm anticipating they'll have another 2-year grant after this one is completed, and that'll be the 5 years of the non-competitive portion. But again, we still have to work for that grant approval from the state and ultimately from you. So that's where the 5 years comes in and the 2 years.
Okay, but now, so now you raised another. Okay, so I'm looking at page 51 of our agenda packet. So are we actually approving a federal grant and a state grant? Because you've got 127,290 for the original agreement, matching 24,535. Then Pat added in, and it's there, the federal funding of 98,140. So are we actually? So your budget is the 98,140. Is that the federal, and then the state will kick in the additional 127,290? So how much are we spending on crime victim services, I guess is my question.
It's the 127, if you divided it by half, it's like 63,000 a year.
But do we automatically get the federal funding of 98,000, or was that a competitive grant?
Well, if you look on page 3 of the grant, page 3 of 3, the 98,000 is actually available from October 1st of this year through September of 2019. The Office of Justice Programs in the state of Minnesota administers the grant, and they receive the funding from the federal government. So we don't actually get a federal portion in that sense. I mean, it helps the state of Minnesota offer these grants to agencies in the state who are assisting crime victims. So it's federal money coming into the state. The state administers those monies and adds state funding, and so we don't actually have to have a separate federal grant, but we do have to meet federal grant guidelines, like with the civil rights and the equal opportunity and things like that. So, and we have to have certain allocations that show up in the budget there for the VOCA and the state. So, and then the match. This is the same way the grant has functioned for years. It's not any different. It's the only difference is that they're offering it now on a 2-year cycle instead of a 1-year.
Well,
Commissioner Jacob.
Jim, you said there's not a resolution, but there's a grant agreement and there's a place. So
Sure.
that's what we're looking for, is a motion to approve the grant, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Jacob and seconded by Commissioner Olson to approve the grant agreement. Any other questions, or Commissioner Ward?
Yeah, just one last question, I'm sorry. So was this already calculated into the 2018 budget? It was, okay, it's already there. All right, thank you.
Okay. Hearing no further questions, all those in favor, vote by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, say nay. Motion carries, all voting aye. Next item is 7.1, receive presentation on the Winona County Primary Prevention Project, which is Stop Sexual and Domestic Violence.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Thank you for inviting me back. Really happy to be here. My name is Helen Bagshaw, and I am chair of the Winona County Primary Prevention Project. And I'm here to present what we've achieved in 2017, and to thank the Winona County Board for their support of $3,000 each year. So we are more relevant today than when we started off in 2008, with the occurrence of sexual violence, harassment, assault. It's reported constantly in our society. And today, I'm not really a Vikings fan, but I was looking at, what was going on, because it's Super Bowl in, February here in Minneapolis. And there's something like 72,000 seats in the Vikings Stadium, right? And I was looking at some data for sexual violence. And in 2015, 61,000 kids and adults were sexually assaulted in a year, some of them more than once, for a total of 77,000 sexual assaults. So it just kind of made me think, wow, we really need to do something. We really need to think about primary prevention.
Is that in Minnesota?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
So it's 61,000 adults and children sexually assaulted in Minnesota in 2015. Okay. And 73,000 people in the Viking Stadium. It makes me so proud that we are doing something, and we're very positive in Winona. So just to remind you about the Primary Prevention Project, we've been going since 2008. So we are sustainable. We are going to celebrate our 10-year anniversary in January. We began after efforts of many citizens, health, human services, educational, judicial, professionals got together. And our mission statement is primary prevention of sexual and domestic violence by providing education, changing cultural norms, and influencing practice, policy, and legislation in Winona County. Our goal is to ensure, and it's constant, that our communities are safe for everyone. So, sorry, I just get myself together here. So, about Winona County Primary Prevention Mission, you've got our action plan. Our 2018 action plan is focused on providing education, changing cultural norms, influencing practice policy and legislation. And I just wanted to share with you 6 main activities that we've been involved in 2017 that have supported this action plan. So, number 1, presentations to the community groups. I know I'm all a bit blur today, but when I'm actually giving my presentation to different community groups about primary prevention, we've been to Learning Club, Winona Health, Winona State, Rotary. In fact, any community groups that will invite us, we will go and talk about what you can do in the community to prevent sexual and domestic violence. We also co-partner with Mattie's Place that do a community training called Darkness to Light. And we have trained 100 people in this community about recognising and preventing and what responsibilities for child sexual abuse. And we've, PPP, Primary Prevention Project, are providing money, advertising, handouts and for that training. Number 2, we've partnered with Beyond Tough Guys, which you've heard of, and Winona Youth Soccer, and we've done the Coaching for Change. And this is great. This is a great program where we train coaches about, not just coaches, but parents and players about preventing sexual harassment, gender equity, that kind of thing. And we brought some trainers down from Duluth, from the Men as Peacemakers, and Winona Youth Soccer were the first group to do this training. It's mandatory in schools, coaches do it, but for, youth group, youth sports, this was something new. And Winona Youth Soccer actually won a community award for being the first in that training. A couple of other things. Number 3, we sponsored PPP, Primary Prevention, sponsored a film at called The Hunting Grounds at the Frozen River Film Festival. And we partnered with Winona State and Women's Resource Centre to do that. Number 4, we partnered with Women's Resource Centre, gave them money and resources to do their clothesline project, which is for Minnesota. We hang a clothesline up and every T-shirt represents a homicide in Minnesota from domestic violence, which is really powerful. We went to 7 locations. It really raises awareness rather than handing out a leaflet. We have purple ribbons, you've seen these all over Winona. We've been on rallies, Take Back the Night, Walk in Her Shoes. Number 5, we've actually done local and state legislation. I went to the Capitol because I am an American citizen, and I spoke to Senator Miller Pulowski about funding for domestic and sexual prevention training. And locally, we are still, with Winona State social work students, they are going around the hotels in Winona to check that our hotels are still clean. That means no pay-per-view pornography, and all our hotels are still keeping that policy going. Also, I became a certified trainer for Safe Bars, which again you funded for me to go, which is a bystander intervention program for local bars and restaurants and hotels to stand up against sexual harassment. We're PPP, Primary Prevention, are also working with the new hotel in Winona, American Inn, about sex trafficking. Their staff has asked us to go and do some training there. I could go on, but I know you've got a million things to do this evening. But I just want to thank you for your time, continued support. This is so important. You know, I always think, because I'm a healthcare provider, that, 15 years ago we would all have been smoking in this meeting because that was the norm, and nobody would have thought anything of it. Now, if I was smoking or one of you were smoking, it would be terrible. The meeting wouldn't, people would stare. And so I think that we can change cultural norms, but it takes a lot of work and it takes all of a community. And we are represented by 16 community partners, 16 coalition members who work and bring on these things in the community. We are going to have a celebration in January to celebrate our 10 years, and we're also recognising one of our founder members, Joe Morse, who died in October, and celebrate all of his achievements, because he was one of the main founders of this of primary prevention. I think I've covered most things I want to say, but just say thank you for your time, thank you for the money. We spent every dollar of it, and we hope to continue to do more things in 2018.
Thank you for your hard work and enthusiasm.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. If we could clone Helen Bagshaw, Winona would be a better place.
I will leave some brochures, so anybody else who's interested, please take one along. And thank you.
Thank you.
So are you from Texas? Had to do that. I don't know why. The next item is 7.2. Discuss and approve or modify recommendation for elected officials, 2018 compensation. I guess I'm thinking maybe the best way to go about this is to handle them in the same order they are in our agenda item, which would be if the board okays that, the sheriff, treasurer, recorder, and county attorney. Were there any presentations that the elected officials wish to make at this time? We've got your information within our agenda item, but if there are any comments that you wanted to make, certainly now would be the time to do that. Sheriff Ganwood.
Thank you. No, I really didn't have any. I met with County Administrator Fritz, and we discussed his proposal, and after a couple of discussions, I felt satisfied with that. I think the board already knows my position. I came and talked to them last year. I still have the same position, but I believe that this would be reasonable.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner Jacob?
Ron.
Sorry, Ron.
Mr. Gaynard, I had a constituent ask me to ask you a couple.
Sure.
The question was, do you receive a retirement compensation package outside of your salary?
Yes.
Okay. And is that a taxpayer-funded package?
I don't know what you mean.
Who pays for your retirement?
State of Minnesota.
Okay.
Well, that's not entirely correct. Are you under PERA?
Yes.
You pay for half of that.
Yes.
Okay. And the county paid for half of it.
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Jacob.
I think that was the crux of what they were after. They wanted to know whether you're receiving a full salary, and I guess that would be full retirement at the same time.
Yes.
And the other question they had was, do you see where a taxpayer could see that as a conflict?
I don't understand. Anyone else that retires from law enforcement goes and gets a job at Winona State, gets a fair wage. They go to St. Mary's and work security there. They get a fair wage. I retired from the job that I had for 36 years, almost 37, and then I was elected. So this is a totally different job in the similar profession.
Okay. That's what they asked me to
Sure.
ask. So.
Okay.
I'm satisfied with that.
Any other questions of Sheriff Ganrud? at this time? Thank you. Oh, excuse me.
Well, I'm a little confused where you're going with the process.
I'm not. I'm just basically trying to allow folks an opportunity to speak and for you to ask questions.
Sure.
And then I'm gathering we're going to get down to making a decision one way or the other on these, but I felt that it would be appropriate to handle it this way, unless the board chooses otherwise.
I've got some general comments, but nothing
Oh, okay.
specifically directed
Okay.
to Sheriff Gannon.
Is it okay then if we just go from one official to the other and to the other and to the other until we get to the end, and then general comments can be made and
Yeah.
certainly motions can be made? Is that acceptable?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you, Ron.
Thank you.
Let's see here. Ms. Sukla. Welcome. Do you have any, we've seen your package here. Do you have anything you'd like to address the board regarding the proposals here?
Not so much the board as Administrator Fritz. I'd like to thank him for putting structure to this process. I think that's something that had been missing in the past. So I just appreciate that.
Very good, thank you. Any questions of the Auditor Treasurer? Thank you, Sandra. Mr. Bamanek. We've also viewed your material here too, and anything that you would like to say regarding the issue?
If there are any areas of our office that you'd like additional information, I'll be glad to provide that. We've got dozens and dozens of reports that we can certainly put together. In January, we'll have a review of 2017, very positive year, lots of information that we'll bring forward, and we do that every January. I appreciate the process with Ken, and I think the comment by the Auditor Treasurer is absolutely correct, that we did have some structure. It was very much appreciated, and I think we've looked at some of the information that by statute we seem to be required to look at, and we did a lot of looking at averages. And I am extremely proud of the Recorder's Office. I have 3 extremely talented people I work with, and I do not consider our office an average office. I've been in almost 40 county recorder offices in Minnesota, so I've got some experience as to how the offices work and operate. And so I just share that tonight. Just very proud of what our office does. Workload is up considerably. I think we've got some very dedicated people. And again, I'm very pleased with the recommendation tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. County Attorney Sonovan. Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry. Does anyone have questions of Mr. Baranek? County Attorney Sonovan.
Well, thank you, Chair Pomeroy. I too want to echo my colleagues as far as the process this year was. I appreciate it very much, and the advance notice that we received in terms of preparing our written materials, and I'm not going to go obviously into those because as an attorney you probably think I'll talk all night. No, I'm not that kind of attorney, but I just wanted to thank Ken and Maureen too for this process this year, and kind of like Ms. Bagshaw, I could go on and on about what the county attorney's office has done, but I won't. I tried to put that into my memo. So if you have any questions, please ask.
Any questions of Ms. Sonovan?
None for me.
Oh. Okay, there don't seem to be any questions, so are there any general comments or considerations that people would like to put forth at this time?
Well,
Commissioner Ward.
okay. Just to be perfectly clear, I had some oral surgery yesterday, and I was advised by my doctor not to talk a lot. So if I'm not enunciating the words quite well, and by the way, this doctor was my son-in-law, so I'm trying to follow his advice. So if I don't sound as articulate as I could be, excuse me. seen, and I'm not deviating from past practice in my whole practice. County government is, and Winona County government, you're all good people. So anything that I say and such, don't take personally. It's just a basic philosophical view of wages and jobs that we do. So, good government starts with good people, and you are all very good people. But we are in my opinion, we're in the public service business. And in the public service business, it's a great opportunity to serve our people, our citizens. But at all levels, public servants need to look at all levels of government. We have country, we have state, we have county, we have township, and most of all, we have the people. The people need to be first. And I was doing some comparison and everything, and I will share, I made copies. We use a certain amount of counties for comparison, and I find it interesting. I found on Ottertail County website who they compare themselves to, and they did compare themselves to Winona County in their levy request. And the one issue I have is we want to compare ourselves county by the wages that are paid. But if I look at the counties that we compare ourselves to, and Winona has always been very conservative. We've held our budget and our levy very low. And when we go to Blue Earth, when we compare budget and levy, the only ones on that list that we use as a comparison that were anywhere near close is Goodhue County with a budget, and I may be off. I tried to get 2018 figures, but I may have some 2017 figures. But Goodhue County has a budget of just under 62 million with a levy of 34, and Rice County has now this is 17, they had a budget in 17 of 54.1 and a levy of 23. Where Winona County, we do the same job as all other 87 counties. But again, we've been very fiscally conservative. Our budget is, I think, just shy of 53 million, and we're looking at levying only 18 million. So we are low in comparisons when I look at dollars. I don't look at wages. And then there was some census data, and it was quite interesting. The average worker in the United States makes $44,148 for a 40-hour work week. Professional people on the average make $63,000. Service people make $28,000. So by no means is anybody in Winona County underpaid, in my opinion. And in all my years of service, public service, I've never had a constituent say, I'm not paying my people enough. And I would challenge, to find constituents in District 5 to tell me to pay them more. But I have to go, and I'm trying to be consistent. I have to look out for my taxpayers. So if you read the Daily News, once upon a time there was a young farmer named Glenn. He had his family and 2 little girls. He just recently harvested his crops. He grows corn, raises hay, oats. He's a dairy farmer, so he raises these crops not only for cash to help pay expenses, but also to feed his animals. His yields were down. He did not get as many bushels to the acre as he anticipated. Now you want me to tell him, so you're not asking me for a pay raise, you're asking for the citizens of Winona County for a pay raise. Now you want me to tell him that he can't tell his wife, no new kitchen appliances this year to make your job a little easier. Tell his children, no, we can't go on vacation because Winona County government wants more money to pay the public servants. And that's as bluntly as I can put it. Again, service before self, and I think that's what a public servant should do. There should be service before self and to make a lasting difference. And I think all of us in this room can make a lasting difference. And as I said, good government starts with good people. But I cannot support the proposed increases at this time. And I'll end with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments, concerns? Anyone? What is it, Commissioner?
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Not flashing correctly. Okay.
So, yeah, and I mentioned this, of course, last year. I struggle with the fact that the salaries are posted when the officials run for office, and they know at that time what it pays, and they accept those positions. So it feels like a kind of a luxury to be able to come and ask for a raise when that maybe should have been part of the elected process. But I guess on a little bit different note than Commissioner Ward, seeing what's happened in Wabasha County, and just in the interest of being fair, we have 4 elected officials that are agreeing to this. It would eliminate all court proceedings. It was well thought through by our administrator. And then furthermore, not only to support the work that, and like Marcia said, excellent work done by the community, excellent work done by these elected officials, but at some point in time, they're not going to rerun, and we want to get good candidates to run for those positions. So there needs to be a number that's going to entice somebody down the road. At least an average number. If we're not average, we're going to have a hard time getting qualified people to retain the positions or qualified people to run for the positions. So, looking at the overall impact of the budget, this isn't what makes or breaks our budget. These salaries or these raises. So, I'll support the raises as they're presented.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Yeah.
Was that a motion?
Yeah, that's a motion. Yeah.
Did you second it, Mr. Olson?
I did not, no.
Oh, I'm sorry. We have a motion. Do we have a second? I will second that. Any discussion? Commissioner Ward?
Okay, so let's be perfectly clear. This plan, what we're proposing is on the bottom of page, is it 124?
Yes.
The county board packet?
Right.
Okay, so, but we're seeing that this was something that Mr. Fritz and the electeds talked about, of trying to come up with something, an average by 2020.
Correct.
So the figure, there's 2 little bar charts there. So,
I need better glasses.
Turn this sideways, turn it down.
right, so well, again, I can't support this to start with, but I can't support tying the hands of a future county board out to 2020. Some of us may not be sitting here, and to make a decision that hampers future county boards is usually against our principles. So if we're voting in favor, are you voting in favor of that average out to 2020?
That is what would happen under the recommendation that was made. I guess one thing I would mention, though, too, is we routinely do 3-year contracts with the various unions for salaries and such.
Right, but these aren't union.
Well,
And
that's
this-
true.
And I think by statute, we're required to do this every year.
Yeah, it's a plan, and my understanding would be each year the board would have to approve that piece of the plan. And as you notice, the recommendation includes a 2.5% increase in the annual increase in wages to cover any changes in other other employee salaries in other counties. But that could change. So in 2 years, we would, we do a market analysis every so often. And so in 2 years, you do the market analysis, and it could be slightly different. So it would be each year the board would have to approve it. The concept is to continue to bring this plan back and march toward the average.
Okay, so to be clear then, you're saying in that percent increase column of 8.9, 22.02, 5.11, and 6.73, which are the increases for 2018, then the 2019 includes
The
2.5%?
2019 percentage doesn't include the 2.5% specifically, but the average is changed by 2.5%. So the column you're talking about does have a percentage that moves it toward the average, because the average keeps moving. So there is a change. But what I'm really suggesting is if you're going to do the recommendation and or the motion the way it is, you would do the 2018 salaries. And then next year you would do the 2019. We would look at these same numbers, make sure they should be similar, and then 2020. And we should be right around that average. It's the same thing that happens in our contractual relationships where we look at a market average now. Well, when the contract comes up again in 3 years, it moves a little bit. Now it may move 2%, it may move 1%, it could move 3%, so then you have to renegotiate. So that's why I suggest continue to do it on an annual basis, and also the fact that I believe the state statute says you need to set them on an annual basis. So.
Right, and so why are we now taking a union mentality with electeds?
I'm not using a union mentality. I'm just using the
two and
clarify.
a half is a.
No, that's the elected officials tend to, in other counties, tend to, reflect what other raises are. All I did was put it in there so you could see that there would be a potential progression of that number. Now, if I put a flat number in there, and then 2 years from now, people look at it and say, well, gee, the market average is different. Why is it different? Well, you had to compensate for that. So, and again, I didn't.
No disrespect. I appreciate that you tried to get us into a system because it has been rather haphazard in the past. Yeah. And Commissioner Jacob did bring up Wabasha. Now, Wabasha had two cases, and one case did not get the pay raise. It was found in favor of the county versus the employee.
And the other one went the other way.
Right. So they had, and again, I'm sorry to say, different judge, different decision.
But you ask why.
Yeah.
I'm guessing why Administrator Fritz chose these numbers would be to not be arbitrary and capricious, right. Which is where Wabasha got into a bind. And then it also lays out a kind of an agreeable map, both for this year, the next 3 years, between the electeds and the county board. A couple of the electeds are asking to get right to average right now, so they're being held back a couple of years here, but they're still agreeing. So my sense is if we don't agree to it, we could end up the same as Wabasha County, and then we've got the added expense of litigation on top of possibly not winning your position. So,
Commissioner Ward.
We could, and that's a prime example of public service. Sue your bosses for more money. Anyway, again, my constituents can't afford more, and what did Social Security recipients, which we all have a lot of in our constituency base, did they get a 2% increase? And they're our most vulnerable adults, really, seriously, people. And to support a 22% increase, an 8.9. I understand, some people came into the job, 5.11 and 6.73 is just higher than I would have liked to see them come in. But I'm done.
May I speak? I would say that I understand your concerns, Marcia, and how you feel about that. I guess the one thing that did concern me all along was that over the past 2 years, it was one of our goals to bring everybody to average. And, we've done that with the unions. There is a difference between union and non-union folks and elected folks. And I get all the arguments and the questions that you put forth earlier too, Stephen. But for the fact that they were elected, we're saying to those 4 people that, yes, we want everybody at average except you. And so, and on that basis, I can support it.
And the word I use is just being fair.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Right. We want to, if our goal is to be fair, I think this only gets to average in another 2.5 years, or another 2 to 3 years.
Yeah, they're not average yet.
No.
In fact, some of them are shockingly below average.
Yeah.
Any other questions, concerns, or comments? Commissioner Ward.
Just going forward, I would like the county board to, this is new, this process and everything, and this proposal is all brand new. At some point in time, I think we should have a slight discussion about it, if we want to continue with that. Because if when I pull out my otter tail, how do we compare to other counties? They had quite a different mix in their county breakup, and I'm not sure exactly why, or it's just been a long-standing policy. We've used those counties that we use, and like I said, they're all over the ballpark as far as
negotiated with the union and Winona County at one point to use those particular counties, right? The comparables.
We worked with the collective bargaining groups to select the comparable counties.
But that's been how many years ago?
That was quite a while.
It's been quite a while. So every policy should be reviewed.
But if that were to be renegotiated, I mean, they're going to.
It's not a negotiated, it's just what we've done. I don't see it as a negotiation, Commissioner Jacob.
Well,
So
it
again,
was to get those 7 at one point.
But none of us sitting here at the table were part of those negotiations and have no history of that. So I'm saying every policy should, I think, be reviewed.
No, that was before me, but I understand the process.
Yeah, but I think we should review, and I would like, as part of the comparables, to be total budget, levy, and do a little bit more of that.
I completely understand every aspect of what you're saying about wanting to be compassionate for the taxpayers. I get all that. Winona County's budget woes are not going to be solved on the backs of a few 4 salaries. We're going to, the unfunded state mandates, how we structure our government and our buildings and all that, those are bigger ticket items that we need to solve those problems, and that's where we're going to solve our budget issues. We're not going to, by squeezing our existing employees to the point of either not rerunning for office or not wanting to stay in Winona County because wages are too low. That's not how we're going to solve our budget issues, I don't believe.
Any other comments, questions, concerns? Hearing none, we'll vote on the motion. All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried with Commissioner Ward voting against. Very good. Next, under Committee Reports and Communications, Commissioner Ward.
Just so that the public knows, we are holding our annual AMC Association Minnesota Counties Conference Sunday through Tuesday, and there we'll be, discussing our platforms for the legislative session, and I'm sure they'll be put out in print after our meeting, and then we can have hopefully maybe a more robust discussion on particular items that we want to, pursue with the legislators.
Okay.
On each policy committee, so that will be forthcoming, and we can have a discussion.
Okay. Any other comments? Hearing none, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion made by Commissioner Olson, seconded by Commissioner Jacob to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? We are adjourned.